Welcome to 5 Minutes in the Word, a daily devotional in the Word of God. Growing up in my family, we had a lot of traditions, and really, we had a lot of traditions involving a lot of different things on places we're going to go, special times of the year, and if you look at me, you can probably tell that some of my favorite traditions revolved around eating. I especially love the holidays on being able to have dressing there for Thanksgiving Day, or being able to eat pork chops and greens and all other kind of things like black eyed peas on New Year's Day. These are traditions that we have in our families sometimes, and they were important to me back then, and now even in my own family, they're important still because traditions are fun. Traditions are good, but not all traditions are good, and we need to pay special attention to that today. And today we're going to turn to Mark chapter 7, and we're going to read some verses today that I think are going to help us to see what we need to truly be listening to and where our true focus needs to be. It says, "And the Pharisees and some of the scribes came together to him, having come from Jerusalem. Now when they saw some of his disciples eat bread and with defiled, that is, with unwashed hands, they found fault. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, holding the tradition of the elders. When they come from the marketplace, they do not eat unless they wash. And there are many other things with which they have received and hold, like the washing of cups, pitchers, copper vessels, and couches. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands?" And so if you were to just pause here, it looks like the disciples have done something wrong, that they have committed some sort of crime, or they have broken the law, and that they're not doing what they need to be doing. But let's see how Jesus responds to these accusations. There in verse 6, it says, "He answered and said to them, Well did Isaiah prophesy of you hypocrites, as it is written, This people honors me with their lips, but their heart is far from me. And in vain they worship me, teaching as doctrines the commandments of men." And I think a lot of times that's what has happened in our world, that mankind has developed traditions. And those traditions have been passed down from generation to generation. Now, traditions, as we say, just in general, are not bad, but what about when they contradict and they go against the Word of God? Because what we're supposed to be teaching as doctrine is the commandments of God, not the commandments of men. Those are the kind of teachings we're teaching, is things of God, things He has instructed us in, and what He wills for us to do, not what mankind wants us to do. We continue on our reading there in verse 8. "So for laying aside the commandment of God, you hold the tradition of men, the washing of pitchers and cups, and many other such things you do." And we find this very interesting because, maybe we're in different circumstances and doing different things now, but there are so many things that we find to be important at times that really do not matter in the grand scheme of things. Here in this specific thing, they're talking about the washing of hands and what the traditions were of how they would cleanse and purify their hands in order to just eat a meal. And here Jesus is trying to point them back in the direction is that you're teaching as doctrines the commandments of men, not the commandments of God. He's trying to get them to focus on what is more important. He said to them, "All too well you reject the commandment of God, that you may keep your traditions." See, they're putting their traditions above the commands of God. It's no problem to wash your hands. In fact, I'd recommend it. If you're going to eat something, it's probably a pretty good idea to wash your hands before you eat. That's even a lesson we've taught our children, since birth. But this was part of their tradition and something that they were trying to enforce. And instead, they were not enforcing what God had commanded them to do and how God had called them to live. Now, this was a pattern that had been established for a long time, a pattern of disobedience. It said, "For Moses said, Honor your father and mother, and he who curses father and mother, let him be put to death. But you say, if a man says to his father and mother, Whatever profit you might have received from me is Corban, then that is a gift to God, that you no longer let him do anything for his father or mother, making the word of God of no effect through your tradition, which you have handed down, and many such things you do." You see here, they have taken the word of God, what God has told them to do, and they've twisted it and they've turned it and they've made it fit their own narrative or their own set of guidelines and rules. And we, as people living under the New Testament today, living according to the Word of God, we need to make sure that we're not putting traditions ahead of what the Word of God has told us to do. Today, let's make sure that we are putting in the forefront of our mind and our teachings the doctrines of Christ.